Okay. Just let me know if anything is required. So, friends, I'm starting with a definition of the forensic audit. I know most of us will be knowing what exactly a forensic audit is, but still, to start with, I'll go by the definition. So my first slides, it is giving a basic definition that a forensic audit is an examination and evaluation of the firm's or individual's financial records to derive, I'll underline this line, to derive the evidence that can be used in a court of law or proceedings. Basically, in forensic audit, we should have all the evidences in our hand, which is to be presented in the court of law. And there is some disturbance. Hello. Yeah. So forensic audits cover a wide range of investigative activities. A forensic audit may be conducted to prosecute a party for fraud, for embezzlement, or yeah.
Sorry, Archana, to disturb you. It's a request to everyone. Please mute yourself because there is some disturbances going on. So please mute yourself. Now you continue, Archana.
Okay. Thank you. So basically, forensic audit is to prosecute a party for fraud or embezzlement. It could be other way around. It could be for solving out some disputes related to bankruptcy filings or business closures. I've given a small picture which is showing the steps to be followed in forensic audit, the main steps. The first is the planning of the investigation, then collecting the evidence, then reporting, and then finally it goes to the court proceedings. So this is the definition as per books, but as per me, or as we go in a simple terms, it is a combination of the entire gamut of audits which we do. It could be internal audit, the statutory, the tax audit, concurrent audits, VAT, GST, everything, even the company search and the due diligence. But it's a combination, but still it's a very in-depth study of the transactions. And it's not only the transactions, the documents which are underlying those transactions. Even we can't consider the documents which are there as a genuine transactions, as a genuine papers to it. We have to even seek the genuineness of those documents. In these audits, we normally go for management response, or we understand that documents are there, the invoices are there, then the transactions which are recorded in the accounting system are fine, it's okay. But in forensic, we even go to check the genuineness of these transactions, these documents. So this is basically a in-depth study of everything, and definitely the extracting of the evidences is a very essential in forensic audit. Anything writing without an evidence will be a boomerang for us. So we have to go by that. Then here I'm saying who can go for the forensic audit. Forensic audit can be done by anybody, by the regulatory authorities like SEBI, NCLT, NHI, SFIO, or the lending institutions like banks and NBFCs. Most of us are hearing pre-corona regime that some company has done a fraud, the bank has come up, that this has been the party has deceived, the party has siphoned off the funds. This is what is there. Then private equity funds for auditing of the parties in which they have invested, and even the companies for their internal issues. If for a particular issues they are facing something and they are feeling that there is something going wrong within the organization, they can go for the forensic audit of this. Well, in this session, I'll be covering some insight of the forensic audit, which is done by the banks, or on behalf of the banks of their borrowers. So I'll be giving you insight of this RBI guidelines. Actually, this forensic audit, when it came up, there was a scheme, corporate debt restructuring. In that, RBI has said that any account which is having 1,000 crores of more of the credit facilities and which has run into the trouble has to go mandatorily for the forensic audit. The reason behind it was that to separate two accounts, the two people, one is who is genuinely ran into the losses and is not able to recover, and the businesses where the funds have been diverted or the siphoned off. So that the CDR proposal can be here in that way. And it has now been mandatory for any account having an outstanding of more than 50 crores and has become NPA. Or in the case of quick mortality, everybody knows the quick mortality, most of us are doing concurrent audits. Am I going fast? Am I okay with my speed?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. So here the another slide says these are the RBI guidelines where RBI has identified some of the activities where how to identify a fraud. So these are certain activities which are given by the RBI that if any of these cases are existing, we have to identify it as a fraud. So it was in the master circular. First is the misappropriation and the criminal breach of trust. Definitely any fund which is given by the bank, the financial institution for the purpose, and it has been misappropriated, it has been taken out of the system by illegal means, it's actually a criminal breach of trust. So if any such case exists, we have to report it under fraud. Then any fraudulent encashment through forged instruments. The instruments are forged. The bills which are given, the vouchers which are given to the bank are forged for any reason. If the books are manipulated or some...
Ma'am,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but we are not able to see your slides moving. We are still on the initial slide,
How come? Wait.
the introduction one.
Is it now okay?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, we can see now.
Okay. So can I start?
Yeah, continue, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. So as you can see, fraudulent encashment through forged instruments I have already covered. Then unauthorized credit facilities extended for reward or for illegal gratification. This is basically the staff accountability, which is normally done by the banks for their staff. But if we found something like this, we can definitely report it. Or if a bank engages to find this thing, we can definitely report on it. Then cash shortages, any kind of cheating or forgery, fraudulent transactions involving foreign exchange, or any other type of fraud which is not coming in specifically on these heads, but it is a fraud. Basically, this entire points are based on the provisions of the Indian Penal Code. So anything which is coming under this net, we have to identify them as a fraud. I'll move ahead. Is the slide moving? Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is moving.
It is moving now. So, here is a sample. This is the normal scope which is given by the bank. It could be more than this, or bank may ask you to investigate a particular area if they feel that there is something going amiss in that particular area. The common scope is the very first point which banks ask you to do is to work on the money trail and to ascertain the end use of the funds. Definitely the funds, because bank is investing in the business, definitely they want to understand where exactly the money has gone if the account has turned in NPA. Was it because of the genuine business losses which has been occurred, or is it just because the money has gone out of the system for some other purposes? The second point is in the same line, to ascertain whether any diversion or siphoning of funds was taken place. Then the third point which they want, if borrower has defaulted but he is capable enough to meet the obligations, the repayment obligations, and it has the capacity, we have to identify that. In that cases, if industry is performing well, the borrower is in actually is performing well, but he's booking the losses to show the bank that he's not able to go for the proper business, or he is regularly getting the money from his debtors, but he is not showing it in his bank accounts. He may be having some other bank account through where he is routing the debtors, but to bank, to his lenders, he is showing that he is not getting the money back to his system, and that's why he is defaulting. So we have to check whether such situations are there. Then the fourth point is utilization of short-term funds for long-term uses. If he has used the working capital for creating some asset, that we need to check. Then transferring of borrowed funds to its subsidiaries or group concerns. You have used the borrowed funds for giving a loan to other people, then that needs to be checked. Routing of funds through bank accounts which are not known to the banks. Lenders normally put a condition while sanctioning that the borrower has to keep bank accounts with them only, and no other bank accounts need to be opened, or should not be away out of the knowledge of the bank. If he is doing that, we have to give the idea to the bank. Then investment in other concerns through equity capital or debt instruments without the approval of the lenders. Once lenders are there, for every investment done by the borrowers to be approved by the lenders. To study the movement in the promoters' funds, both equity and unsecured loans. To comment on the financial statements. Now the bank wants us to give the comparison of financial statements for whatever years, like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Here I would say that banks normally give you assignment for more than a year when the account turned NPA. Prior to the year when the account turned NPA, it could go to 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, could be 7 years. It's all depends on how banks define the audit period for you. I'm continuing with the scope. There is tracing the source of contribution by promoters by analyzing the equity and debt. Here it has been seen many a times, it has been seen that promoters has not actually brought in the money. They have diverted the money received from the bank itself and shows it as their own contribution, or actually the funds have not flowed into the system. They have just marked an purchase entry or a sale entry. It's just a JV they have passed into the system, and they are showing it as a source of their contribution in the business. Then we have to comment on any abnormal trade transactions, any specific suddenly there is a single bill of 1,000 crores or 100 crores, whatever, which is not matching with the normal trade transactions of the borrower. We have to verify the sales and purchases for their genuineness. It's not like if bills are there, the person is paying the GST or VAT on the bills, the transaction becomes genuine. We have to see whether the bill or whether the transaction is genuine or not. Then again comes debtors, creditors. If there is any concentration of debtors, then we need to seek that particular debtor or a creditor, whether he is worthy of such much of transaction or not. A person is showing 1,000 crore of debtor of a party, and that party is actually having a paid up capital of 1 lakh only. How come 1,000 crore he can pay off to him? So then verify the inventory for its existence. We have seen that the person is showing a lot of inventory, but actually in actual, when we went there in the go downs, there was no inventory at all, or inventory which was much lesser than what he was claiming in his books of accounts. Then we have to identify the type of fraud that has been operating. If we found some fraud, we have to classify as per the RBI guidelines the fraudsters involved and definitely the evidences. We have to keep in mind that whatever we are saying, whatever we are findings, they should be a valid evidence to it. we can gather evidences from anywhere. We can get the evidences from bank, the correspondence with the bank, what bank has, how the bank has assessed the borrower, uh, the borrower, the information which are given by the borrower, then from the public domain like ROC, the income tax site, the GST website, so we can get the information from there. To move further, here are certain tips which I want to share with you, which I gained from my audit during my audits. So firstly is thing that bank gives you a lot of scopes. So when we are giving the scope, we are writing the report, we have to comment, we should cover all the scopes. Even if we didn't get the informations to a particular scope, we should clearly mention it. Because of these unavailability or absence of this information, we are not able to comment under this scope, or we won't be able to conclude under this point. RBI says that nowadays any forensic report should be conclusive. We cannot say that we see this, we saw this, and this is this, but if it is fine, we have to give a conclusive report. Even banks ask for the same. Then the language, definitely the language should be simple and clear. A third person, when it is reading, he should know what exactly we want to say. And whenever we are saying that an auditee has misrepresented the information or has done the fraud, we should have sufficient evidences in our hand to say this. Otherwise, our report will be taken as a void and it will be boomerang for us. So every evidence here, one thing I would say, ki whenever we start a audit, a forensic audit, the communication should be in writing, either in the physical form of letters or through mails, and there should be a continuous communication, and those all should be recorded. Otherwise, even a single miss and the question will we will be questioned as an auditor. So better to keep all the communications intact, either with the bank, either with the borrower, or either with the third party if we are asking for the confirmations. Even when we go for the confirmation from the debtors and creditors, the same should be through registered post or speed post or registered AD. It should be through registered AD, or if we are going by courier, then acknowledgement should be there, so that a third party cannot say that we have not received your letter. Then whatever references we are taking from the sites, we should clearly mention the sites. Either we have taken reference of any print media, so we have to give that reference. Any site we have seen, and sites it's better to go for a government site. MCA or income tax, these are government trusted sites. I'm saying trusted sites, and not like Facebook or WhatsApp is not that trusted in that manner. Then report whatever we have used the methodology for our findings, for our observations. They should be clearly mentioned in the report. The limitations which we have faced, non-availability of the report, non-cooperation from the borrower, or non-cooperation from some other person who is attached to this assignment, we should clearly mention it.
Archika,
yeah.
You talked about the trusted sites. Like,
yeah.
Can you just elaborate how do you concrete upon a site whether it can be trusted or not?
Trusted, I would say the government, as I told you, the government sites are the trusted site. If you're going on MCA site, on the income tax site, GST VAT sites, these are trusted sites, basically.
But then these are statutory sites, right?
Yeah.
They have only statutory information. If you want to derive some information which is not available on this portal, the government portals, and you need a third party, for example, if I'm doing a forensic audit for a bank wherein a a director has actually, money laundered the entire loan amount to his personal ID, and I want to just get into the status of the director. So normally what we do is we go to the social websites and try to understand whether he has been, spending money for foreign tours and all. So these are definitely a non-trusted website. Plus, they have a lot of information which cannot be, giving us a concrete evidence.
Right.
So my thought is there, like, I understand government sites are there, but apart from this, if you want to conclude on certain sites which you can use as a reliable evidence while putting ahead your case, how do you concrete whether a particular site, like for example, news agencies are there or any other website, to concrete upon them? What sort of tools that we use to concrete this?
No, there are no certain tools to concrete on this. Basically, what here is required is the sites which are normally available to everyone, or there are some paid sites also which give you something, some information, some inside information if, when you pay for it. So even that can be taken as a trusted sites.
No, from the concept of
Sorry?
trust, what I mean, I'm sorry to asking the
Yeah,
question.
no issues, no issues,
From
no
the
issues.
concept of trust, it basically what I understand is the site should be so reliable that any evidence that you pick from there should not be a matter of disconnect with the authorities that you're putting up the evidences.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly,
So
exactly. I
many
agree
a
with that.
times, many a times, if you see, there are extension notifications which many of us chartered accountants would agree that there would have been a notification which is circulated, but then ultimately that government site has to come back and say that the notification is actually morphed or maybe photoshopped, and there is no extension on a particular return or information. So many a times, this information itself is so because of digitization, this has become very easy. So today even I can morph a particular person face and say that this particular person is this person. So
Right.
yeah, my concept is how do you create a a base, a database of these trusted sites, because at the end of the day these evidences are going to concrete on your report, right?
Right. That's why I've said that's why I've taken a name of Facebook and WhatsApp, which are still not that. Though I have heard this. Even income tax department is searching for Facebook profiles so that they can see if the assessee is going for good holidays, and he is showing a loss over there.
Absolutely.
So this is there, but then that's why I'm saying even if Facebook and WhatsApp may not be taken as a trusted source, you can report in your report that we have seen this, but whether that will be taken in a serious manner by the court or not, that's not known.
Agree.
Right. So
Yeah.
the statutory sites or the paid sites which are there, if we go by that, yes, we have a concrete proof are in our hand that we have taken it from a very trusted sites.
Okay, point taken.
This is the thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So should I move ahead or anything else?
No, yes, please move.
Yeah. One more thing I'll mention here is this: ki whomsoever we are meeting, either in the banks or in the with the borrower's side, we should mention the names of the persons along with their designations, so that it should be confirmed that we are meeting the right persons and we are getting the right informations, and to prove in the court that it's not like that we have created, because the person may come up, no, I don't know, I have not given any information, I don't know these person whom they have dealt with, uh, I don't know from where the auditor has come up. So everything should be in writing and or through mail. Right now, in today's world, mail is actually there. Morphing could be there, but then we trust for that way, right? So friends, here from now I'll be sharing some experiences, some of my findings here. the screen, everyone?
Yes, you can go ahead, huh? दिख रहा है.
Right, but I'm not able to. Wait. Now see how the balance sheets which are given to the bank, how they are manipulated. If you can see in the Excel sheet which I am showing, there are two parts as per the audited balance sheets. The audited balance sheet was shared with the bank, and it was available with ROC also. But
Archika, unable to
yeah.
view the balance sheet.
Sorry?
Unable to view the balance sheet.
Balance sheet is not visible.
Wait. Is it okay now?
Yeah, quite
Yes.
clear.
Yeah, clear?
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is a balance sheet of only a single year, a single financial year, where in the first column I have given the figures which were presented to the bank and which were available in the ROC site also. And this is as per the assessment. I'll tell you how the assessment was done and the variances. Basically, in this case, what the borrower had done, he is, if you go through the groupings, we all make the groupings, the trial balances, and we classify each and every item into where should it go in the debtors and the creditors or this. So basically what he had done, he had manipulated the figures and not the figures but the classification of the various heads. Like if you see this line, everybody is able to see.
Yeah, it is visible. It is visible.
Yeah, so just see the unsecured loans which was as per the audited balance sheet was 68 crores. But when we go deep into the groupings which are provided to us, it comes out to be only 23 crores. There was a difference of 45 crores. The reason being, what he had done, he had classified creditors of rupees 45 crores as its unsecured loans. Now giving a very rosy picture to the bank that he has put in money extra than his required contribution in the business. The 45 crores, and this this also covers the scope of the bank where it says that we have to give comment on the movement of unsecured loans. So this is the which I was saying that funds may not have been introduced in the system, but it could be because of some entries from some of the journal entries or something. Here he had booked the purchase entries and he classified it into the unsecured loans. Just see the figure of trade payables. It was 177 crores as per audited balance sheet, but as per assessment, it was 500 crores, more than 500 crores. There was a difference of 335 crores. Again, he had given an impression to the bank that the credit facilities availed by him are basically for the payments towards the trade payables, the creditors of the company. But actually, it was not the case. These were 512 crores of creditors were outstanding in the books of accounts. Then there was advance from customers, which he 90 crores from the customers, but he was showing the debtors net of it, basically. So now just see on the asset side, the loans and advances to related parties. Just see the figure. It was 1.82 crores only on the books, and since it's a crores of rupees of balance sheet, 1.82 crores is hardly anything and nobody will see to it, but actual picture turns out to be 136 crores. It was what he has done that in 136 crores of this loans and advances, he had netted of creditors worth of rupees 135 crores. means he is netted off credit side with the debit side, and the figure which comes was this. Actually, he was using the borrowed funds for giving for granting loans to the construction companies, and he was earning interest on them. So this is the diversion of fund which is here. And the debtors, yes, he was showing debtors 705 crore, it was 818 crores, 112 again the creditors were netted off here, and the advance to suppliers, again the same thing. So this is how he manipulated the figures when he give to the bank. At one hand, he was showing a rosy picture that I have put in extra money in the business, and I have used entire credit facilities for payment to the to my creditors. And on the second, that I am not able to get the amount from the debtors, and my amount is stuck off. This is in the. So this is one case. Is anybody have any question in this, or should I move ahead?
Archika,
Yeah.
this unsecured loans which you mentioned about having 45 crores disconnect, right? They claimed it to be 68 crores, and apparently it turns out to be
Right.
23
Right.
crores. So as far as I understand, unsecured loans do not have any trails. Normally it is a cash transaction or something like that. But finally you zeroed on that it is a trade payable, which he has moved from unsecured, like trade payables to unsecured. So
Right.
what was the trigger that for you to understand that this unsecured loans is actually inflated amount?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Actually, this is the first step which we do, that when we got the books of accounts from the borrower for our verification, we first match our balance sheet, the balance sheet which we are having from the bank and from the borrower available with the ROC. We match that balance sheet with the trial balance of the books of accounts of the borrower which they have provided. Otherwise, we may end up in analyzing some figures, some wrong figures. So when we were doing it, we found that the balance sheet, the balances with the balances are not matching with the trial balances, the classification which were given in the trial balances. So then we asked, we went into the groupings, and then in groupings we found that the creditors were merged, and for that also we saw each and every transaction, the company, the ledger of each and every transaction, what actually was the transaction, and we saw that there was purchase invoices booked and payments were made towards that.
So basically grouping was the real trigger to you to understand.
Yes, yes. Actually, in every forensic audit, we should ask for the groupings. It is very essential.
I understand.
Otherwise, you won't be able to get the basis required. In balance sheet, we just see it's an unsecured loan from the related parties. But who all are the related parties and what are their balances, we don't know.
Agree.
So, right?
Yeah.
Anything else?
No. From my side, no. Maybe other team members.
Anybody else? Oh,
We can move. And can move. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Archika, one point is one of the queries is share with us the practical, the experiences.
Yeah.
More of a practical experiences, and how do you zeroed on the various observations. So that is one request from the members.
Yeah. Sure. Actually, these are the practical experience. Whatever balance sheet I've shared previously, also it was one of the our observations only, and it took us some time. Other than what regular audit is required, it took us some time to get to the actual position of the financials of the company. This bank was also not knowing. They were also surprised to see what was the actual position of the financials. So, and even those creditors which were there for 512 crores, many of them were actually fake. They were fictitious creditors. And that comes out when we does the vouching. I'll come with my another slide for vouching.
Yeah.
So this is the second, I'll tell you in this, what has happened. The borrower had submitted one balance sheet to the lenders. So when we started our audit, we come across some other balance sheet. Actually, this balance sheet which they have submitted to the lenders was not available in the ROC. So when we ask them ki why it's not there on the ROC, they says ki you can see I have written one remark over there that original was submitted but not on ROC under the argument the shareholders didn't approve this balance sheet. The shareholders were demanding to put in some actual expenses which are left behind, so they want to change this balance sheet. The very interesting part was that the directors, both the directors in the company were the shareholders of more than 50%, and it is a closely held, it's a limited company, but a closely held limited company, and only the family members were the shareholders to it. So there was not a third party who can raise such an objection. That was an interesting part in this. And revised balance sheet which was submitted was with BIFR. It was of the same year. It was for the year 2014. And as per the condition of the BIFR, your net worth should be eroded. Then only you can file with the BIFR. So when the person came to know that lenders are now coming for the forensic audit, he immediately changed the balance sheet. He showed that his net worth has been eroded and submitted the proposal to the BIFR. This fact was not known to the bank till we started our forensic audit. So you can see the first thing, the profit and loss account. He was showing profit to the banks of 83 crores, and in the revised balance sheet, it was 195 crores of a loss. How he has booked the loss, I'll let you know. Just we can come down. Now see the trade payables in the, again the same thing. Here to lenders he has shown 302 crores. To BIFR he has shown 818 crores. This is what he has given the impression to the BIFR that he is not able to pay off his payables also. He is so much into losses. These are other figures which he didn't show in the balance sheet to bank, but to BIFR, just to basically balance sheet which he made as appropriately acceptable to BIFR. Now, just see, I'm not going for inventories, just see the debtors position. Just see, it's 45 crores considered debtors more than 6 months. It was 45 crores as per the balance sheet which he has submitted to the bank, and others were considered as good, 771 crores. But in the BIFR, what he has done, he has increased the figure of debtors which were considered good but outstanding for more than 6 months to 245 crores, and considered doubtful 234.83 crores. And hence his debtors, the total debtors increased from 817 crores to 1100 crores, and he has provided for doubtful debts to the tune of 234.83 crores. Just see my remark over there. When we went into the details of these 234.83 crores, there were only 2 parties whose debtors he has provided as a book debts. And the interesting part was that in which year he has provided as a book bad debts. Till 20th of March, he was selling to them. He was booking sale bills to them, and on 31st of March, he said that these has become the bad debts for him. So this is how the balance sheets in 2 sources were manipulated. Anything in this? Anybody has to say something?
No, we can move. Yeah.
We can move? Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So I'll come to my slide and to my another case study. Here, if you can see, hope everybody is ready, is able to see the screen.
Yeah, the balance sheet is open, yes.
Now, it's not balance sheet, wait. Is it fine?
Yeah, case study 2.
Yeah, case study 2. Basically, Basically, it's a pattern analysis, pattern trend analysis. We see various patterns. Now, I'll give you an example. This is the example what I'm giving. It's a basically it's called a circular entries or the round tripping entries in the forensic terms. If you can see, there is a transaction. It's in the books of the borrower, but he's receiving amount from some party and he's paying to the some party. But the set of the parties is one. There is some defined set of parties in which entire receiving and payment is going on, and if you can see the amounts, they are more or less similar. Hardly there are some differences. Basically, this is done with an intention to increase the turnover in the working capital account, in the cash credit account, to increase its turnover. That amount is coming, amount is going. Bank sees that if a lot of turnover is going on, then the account is doing good. This is the impression on them. Similarly, if we go down, there are two parties you can see, ISWL and ISL. The most interesting part was that the management of both the companies was same. ISWL and ISL were having the same management, and it was just the amount was coming in and amount was going. That's it. Nothing was happening. There was no actual transaction was going on. It was just this. Am I right? Is it okay?
Yes, can you just tell, hello?
Yeah, tell me.
This SCAPL is the name of the party, right?
Right.
Okay.
It's the name of the party. Basically, we identified, and it's actually a pattern which even anybody can see. If you go, if you analyze the cash credit account, you can see that in a day, in a particular date, amount of some party is coming and it is going to a particular party. And this pattern, if it is continuously coming up, means we need to check, we have to go in depth of this transactions. It is basically identifying the transaction in whose depth we have to go. We cannot go in 100% of the transactions. So by analyzing the patterns, by getting the trends, we can see the we can identify the transaction which need to be in deep, which to be studied, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So in the second slide, again there is an Excel sheet. Everybody is able to see the Excel sheet? Hello.
Case study 2, right? Inventory sold on loss. Yes. Can you make it a bit large? It's not visible. The numbers are not visible. Enhance that view.
Okay. Is it fine?
It's not refreshed, I think.
Sorry?
It's not refreshed.
You are seeing the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, PowerPoint.
No, it's an Excel now. It's an Excel now. Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So one trend I've shown you was in the financial entries in the cash credit accounts. Now this is the trend where we observed actually I would say here the person, the borrower whose accounts we were auditing, he has done a good in Tally. He was maintaining the accounts in Tally, and he has given for every inventory he has given party wise data. So when we analyze that, we said we have seen that between a certain set, the borrower was a trader of a ferrous metals, so he is he is purchasing goods from one party on certain rate. You can see the difference in the rate in the same date. Just see, on October 2015, he had purchased some 1,35,000 kgs of material from party KMPL at a rate of 316. but he had sold this entire quantity at a rate of 310 only to a particular party. And this trend was going on for a long, and every time he's purchasing from KMPL, he's selling it to SVWPL, that too at a loss. Means he was intentionally booking the losses in the books, showing the bank that he is going into losses. This is what. And similarly here, if you can see, these GWMPL, APL and UIL, these all three parties were having the same management among themselves, and it was just the borrower purchasing from GWMPL at a rate of 255 and was selling to UIL at a rate of 250, just booking a loss of 5 rupees 5 per kgs. So these are all the patterns which prompt us to go deep into the transactions, to go deep into the genuineness of the transactions. And there we found, after doing all the procedure, after studying, firstly we get that all the parties were of the same management. Then secondly, when we vouched, we found that these were fictitious transactions and no actual goods, no transportation of goods were taken. It was just on papers only, and these were all these transactions were normally all were belonging to the pre-GST regime. Most of them were pre-GST regime. So can I move? Anybody has any question in this or anything to be cleared?
We can move.
We can move?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, fine. So one last, yeah. Now this is the last which I'm saying. In forensic audit, vouching is very essential. Though we do vouching in our other audits also, but we may not be seeing the vouchers with these points in our mind when we did vouching for our forensic audits. Actually, many of our concerns will get cleared, that and we got a strength that if we are saying that a party is misrepresenting or the party has inflated the sales of purchases, the vouching gives us a strength to say this also. So I'm just sharing what I found in the vouchers. There was the use of whiteners, the change of dates, even the year was changed. The relevant contents on which basis we book it in our books of accounts were changed. Year was changed or the party was changed, something like this. Then one thing which we said, there are two different, apparently we found that there are two different suppliers not relating to each other. But when we saw the patterns of the invoice numbers on those invoices given by those suppliers, we found that the invoice is similar. Invoice numbers are similar. The pattern is similar. But this you won't be able to get in any books to see. This is by your eyes. You see that even the fonts are same. Only the numbering numbering has been changed a little bit. Whatever has been written, the addresses are written on the same places. Everything is same. The only the bit invoice number has changed and the name of the supplier is changed. So that patterns need to be studied to understand that, yeah, this transaction could be fictitious or some inflation of purchases or sales has taken place. Actually, we done this and we ultimately found that it belonged to the same management. Actually, here I would share with you that we had done this The invoices were actually export invoices. It was way back, the invoices pertains to somewhere 11-12. That time even IceGate was not that updated. So we just saw the patterns. Ki, two suppliers, two export suppliers, two import suppliers, but though they are different, but their pattern is same. And then we just look into the details. We found that a same person is managing both the this invoices. So, and the third point is actually great. It's vehicle numbers on the sales and purchase invoices from parivahan.gov.in. This is a site where you find the vehicle numbers registered all over India. You will find these numbers over here, and in these details you can find the type of the vehicle, the name of the person in whose name this vehicle has been registered, and the capacity of the vehicle, and other few details also. So when we checked, I'm talking about that person who was in trading, and where we were thinking that he's booking the fraud of fictitious sales. We went into the details of these vehicle numbers through this site, and what we found was many of these turned out to be two-wheelers, like scooty or motorcycles. Even three-wheelers were also there. We found ambulance also there. We found the ready concrete mixer, the mobile ready concrete mixer, which moves on the roads, was also there. There was a Maruti van also. There was a 12-seater or 11-seater minivan, passenger van was also there. And this person who is into trading was dealing in transporting of 100 to 125 MTs of goods at a time. So this clarifies our concern that yes, the transactions were actually inflated, the sales purchases were actually inflated and fake, and there was no actual transaction of the goods has taken place. Then the fourth point which we saw is use of the same vehicle number while transporting the goods to a particular party. We have also seen, when we were going through this checking of these vehicles, that when this person is selling goods to a particular party, a single party, same vehicle number was going to transport the goods, and every time three vehicles were moving, the number of three vehicles were the same. Even the invoices which was made were on the same chronology. If vehicle number, I would say MH010203, so same chronology was following every time whenever the goods are said to be sold to this particular party, and every time the invoices were created, there was a difference of 5 minutes in creation of invoices in the same chronology every time, and multiple times. I mean, I think more than 100 invoices were booked, and every time this was the pattern. So in this, vouching has helped a lot to us. Then no transporter bills or weighing slips accompanying the invoices raises doubts. That is, so we all know there. Then I would say in the condition of invoices, we all know that normally in forensic audit, we get audit for more than a year, 2 years, 3 years, and that too past. With even NP accounts get bad. Even after 2 or 3 years, we get the forensic audit to do the assignment for years before the NPA, the account turned bad. So we all know that during this period, the documents, the invoices, they have the mark of passage of time on them. There is some wear and tear on them. But what we found, that they were purely fresh. Invoices were like as if they have been printed just before we have started our audit. Very freshly they were put it into the file. Properly filing was there. though there was no transporters or weighing slip in this, and even the transporters of weighing slip, transporter slip was there, then we all know that when the material is transported from one place to another place, the transporter's copy, the papers which are carried by the transporters, they are not always remain in a A4 size shape. They are into multi-folds with pinch of, there would be some mark of sweat also, some mark of some dust also, there would some grease or something like this. So a fresh wing, this transporter's slip of transporter's bill for transportation of the goods, then again it raises a concern that the invoices could be fake. So that's why vouching in our case is very important. Seventh point which I was saying is the addresses. Hello, am I audible to everyone?
Yes, yes,
Hello.
you're audible. Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. Yeah, because I've got a message that poor quality, so I was asking. So the seventh point, yes, vouching. We have the suppliers, even the partnership or proprietorship are also the suppliers or the customers. So for a company, we want to dig down, we want to know about the company. We have various sources. MCA is the best source for that. We have other sites like Zybocorp or Toffler, which gives you an insight of a company, who were the directors, who were the what were the registered offices and all this. But for proprietorship and partnership, it's really becomes challenging to get the details. Who were the partners, what were the addresses and everything. So when we do vouching, even the addresses, definitely there are addresses, there are authorized signatories. From there also we can find out if any relation prevails between the borrower and the suppliers or the customers. So we have seen in vouching also that the address of the proprietorship concern is the same as the registered address of the borrowing company, or the registered address of the main supplier or main customer of the borrowing company. So we can raise a concern over that. We can raise a red flag over that. Then it has also been seen that the corporate address of one company is a registered office of the other company. Thereby, it gives an indication that these could be a related party also. Here I would say one thing, that we have a definition of related parties in Income Tax and Companies Act, wherein lot says that a director, his family members, close family members, or having a shareholding of 2% or 20%, they or the subsidiaries or the holding companies are said to be related parties. But nowhere it is said that companies which are sharing registered offices could be, I'm not saying mandatorily, but could be the related parties. There could be a relation between them for some reason or the other. So that things also clarifies when we go for the vouching. We have also seen that the signing authorities of the bills, sometimes it matches, and this also give an inclination that something amiss, something is going on, and maybe these two parties may be the related parties, or the transactions are not that much of genuine, or could be something amiss over there. So we could drill down those transactions in that way. So friends, from my side, I think I'll be able to give you some insight about the forensic, and I'll be able to share with you the experiences which I gained. If any questions are there, if anything to know, please let me know, or anything to be clarified. Hello.
Archika,
Yes.
thank you so much for the session.
Yeah. Thanks.
I just wanted to know, because I'm like very new to this particular topic. So,
Yeah.
some guidance as to how I can start in this phase. I mean, if you could help somewhere, matlab.
Well, frankly, are you in means your proprietorship concern or a partnership concern? How?
I'm in a proprietorship firm only.
Proprietorship firm, okay. So actually, as I told you, that forensic audit can be done by anybody. Means by any organization. Even the companies also go for forensic audits. So I'll say if you can do the forensic course of our ICI, if you have not done so, we can do. For banks, actually, now it's mandatory to get yourself empaneled with Indian Bank Association for your forensic audits. There is two criteria, below 50 crores and above 50 crores. So for banks, we have to get empaneled, and then only banks will approach us, or we have to approach the bank that we are empaneled with IBA, and forensic audit can be considered for forensic auditors. And if you want to, you can associate yourself with some forensic who are there dealing in forensic audits. You can do work with them to get the experience, and then you can start for your own.
Yeah, nice suggestion. I will look forward for some more help in future if required.
Yeah, sure. I'll be there.
But
yes.
Nice eye-opener case study.
Yeah, because it's something different. Normally we do statutory audits and this, so we are abide by the rules and regulations which are governing this. So for forensic audit, though we have to abide by the rules and regulations, but we have to drill down the things, because every person from forensic audit, when I'm doing forensic audit, one thing I understood, that mere paying of the taxes does not make a transaction genuine. Just because a person has paid the taxes, income tax, or the VAT or GST, doesn't mean that he or she has the transaction has been done is a genuine transaction. So this is the thing.
You said Indian Bank Association, right?
Yeah, right.
Empanelment with
Association. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes. There is a site of it, IBA ki site hai, iba.gov.in, I suppose. So you can get the idea. They periodically they come up with their empanelments. So even you can try. They have their own criterias. Yeah.
Thank you, Archika.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Any further questions?
Yeah, exactly. I also wanted to ask the same thing, that can you throw some light that how we can register our firm on IBA empanelment? Because I know that there are some criterias are there, but I think that उनके जो empanelment होते हैं वो I think बहुत frequently होते हैं. So from where we can get the information कभी उनका empanelment आने वाला है वैसा?
Actually, that we have to check. We have to watch on their their website. We have to regularly check their websites. I think our institute would have been putting it on our PDICI also.
No, IBA का empanelment उस पे नहीं आता है, general में नहीं आता है.
Okay.
उनकी website पे ही रहता है.
Yeah, actually they are not doing regularly. I think a year back or so they had came up for this empanelment.
Yeah, I know.
They had floated this empanelment, so we have to keep a watch on this. As of now, even I don't know. That came to us and we applied, and fortunately we got empaneled there. But it's only for 2 years. One thing more, it's not for a lifetime, it's only for 2 years.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah.
Archika, other than banks, any other corporates giving this forensic audit?
Yes, many of them are giving, but Ashna ji, frankly, since I'm totally into banking, so my marketing is limited to that only. But yeah, even companies are doing it. The big companies are doing it.
Can we have a representation to the ICI that at least the information of this forensic audits coming from RBI or the Indian Bank Association or any other, MCA or any other portals should be at least circulated to the members, That is one part of it. And secondly, forensic audit should be given more weightage, because now what is happening, as I mentioned in the initial session
Yeah.
also, that forensic has
Yeah.
given us, a very deep understanding of how the this fraud and everything is happening. As Archika mentioned, that the
Yeah.
invoices were actually, manipulated to such an extent that it seemed to be fresh. And,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, so maybe forensic audit can give us, a more deep understanding of frauds. Because normally when you do an audit, you only get into the checks of internal controls, but the frauds are when they are connived frauds, when they
Yeah.
are planned in a very, strategic way, it
Right.
becomes very tough for a normal auditor to, understand these challenges. So maybe ICI
Exactly.
can take a leap and, make this more, not only in terms of doing a forensic audit, but in
Yeah.
the normal audit also using the forensic tools, so
Ah.
that even smallest of smallest gaps can be actually
Right.
brought to the knowledge of the auditor. I believe in, identifying the risk, whether you take it up with the management or the government or not.
Yeah.
But at least you are aware that there is a risk which is existing in the company, and you are signing it off as a statutory auditor, right?
Yes. Yes. And being an auditor, being a statutory auditor, the sword lies on our head, because if fraud is going on and we are not able to report it, then first thing is asked from the auditor only and not the borrower.
Yeah.
Even
First,
even the
first,
banks.
first question. First question goes to the auditor. What was the auditor
Yeah.
doing for this entire time?
Yeah,
Yeah,
actually, this is
completely
even
agree.
when we presented our cases to the bank, when we give our findings to the bank, the first thing which they do was they issued the memos to all the auditors, all the auditors, to the internal auditor, to the statutory auditor, and to the stock and receivables auditor also.
Yes.
So this is there. Here one thing I'll say ki when you are you are doing forensic audit and you are getting cooperation, because forensic audit is such that you won't get cooperation from the borrower very easily. So if you get a cooperation from them and you are visiting their sites, do take the photographs of whatever sites you are visiting along with their addresses and everything. This we normally do in a stock and receivables audit also. So, and we should form a visit report that we have visited on these dates to these premises, and that also gave a weightage to our report. It is actually
Got it.
required also.
Yeah, and regarding ICI, what I can say is definitely, Archana, we can try.
Yeah.
Representation already पहले भी हुए हैं regarding IBA empanelment also, और otherwise जो हमारा forensic audit वाला course है, IBA अभी तक उसमें qualification में उन्होंने हमको authorize नहीं किया है कि as a forensic audit certificate chartered accountant जो hold कर रहे हैं, उनके लिए उनको priority, because they are giving priority to, I think, CFE, right, Archika, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, CFE is more, but even if we are writing that we have done this course, some weightage is given, but yeah, CFE is more. CFE is more.
Definitely. Because उसके लिए क्या है कि हमारे ICI के panel पे, if we are there, if we are holding a certificate, definitely as an forensic auditor we are there on the panel. So as and when we will ask to the institute, please share the details of forensic auditor. So वो एक weightage definitely मिलता है. I completely agree. But जैसे हम बोलते हैं कि RBI ने mandatory किया है कि if you want to do a bank audit, so DISA qualification is required. So the same manner, वो representation already जितना मुझे पता है last year उन लोगों इंस्टीट्यूट ने किया है RBI को कि आप forensic audit के लिए भी FAFP certificate को recognition दो. So let's see how it works. But definitely जो अर्चना ने suggest किया बाकी भी, since this year I'm into digital accounting board as well as IFA and FAFB group study group core member. So definitely we'll try to represent something good जो benefit overall members के लिए.
Even one more suggestion I will give. Even this FFP course, if we include more into this, the financial information, as I said, if we can include that also in our course, that would be a great for everyone. Those who are beginners, especially for them, it is there. Digital forensics is no doubt is very essential nowadays, but financial forensics, what we do. So because in banks we normally do financial forensics rather than digital forensics. So if we include that in our course, that would be a great experience.
ठीक है, sure, noted. मैं देखती हूँ पर weekend.
Shweta,
Yes.
yeah, I am not very clear how this CFE works. Basically, understand it is also post graduation course, I think, and it is applicable. Like anyone can avail it, whether a graduate or someone. But
Yes,
can
yes,
we,
yes.
yeah, can we actually incorporate those CFE exam, examiner tools in our FFD course and make it matching to CFE, and then we can have a level play to the government that we already have those knowledge, of CFE, which.
Yeah, Archana ji, one thing I think, because I have, you have also cleared the exam, and I have also cleared the exam. I have gone through this CFE manual, which was shared to us by the eminent faculties. So I have seen that many questions were from that CFE manual also.
So possibly CFE maybe a certificate which can be incorporated in our FFD course,
Right.
and made much more comprehensive, so that tomorrow that disconnect of CFE having a better advantage with government officers is
like
yeah.
Well, like DISA, like we have DISA, we can go for this forensic also. Means, right now forensic is a certificate course, and DISA is like a much better version of it.
Yeah, diploma. It is diploma.
Yeah. So if we can go with it, that would be great.
Yes.
Definitely. Let's I take the decision at least, but we can represent. Definitely, yes.
Yeah, we need to represent. It's upon the ICI.
Because it's a very good opportunity for we chartered accountants, because we have that knowledge, we have that instinct, and we have that smell that something is going wrong, something is amiss. So
audit is in the blood. It's in the blood.
It's there.
I don't know, but many a times when I'm reading some social messages, and let me tell you, I have this, this gut feeling that the message itself is wrong. So when I get into the actual thought of it, and I come to know that I was really right in doubting that messages and all. Now, because of digitization and now COVID coming into place, and many companies declaring themselves bankrupt, even though they are not bankrupt, taking this advantage and opportunity of becoming a bankrupt and saying that we don't have money to pay the liabilities or pay the salary. Believe me, this is going to be, very big opportunity for all the professionals.
Right.
So if no question is there, we can, I think, close for today.
Anybody is there?
Yes.
I think Rekha Bhatia is asking about what about FAFD from ICAI. So if you can highlight some part of it. I think she has not put a complete question, only she is inquiring about FAFD.
Yeah, FAFD. Yeah, Archika, you please.
No, please, Shweta, you carry on. Complete, please.
No, you please continue.
Yeah, basically FAFD is a course which Institute has introduced for giving the basics about the forensics, the forensics which we are doing, and more that is into digital forensics. If you have done DISA, you will be able to understand maximum part of it. So it's a course for a week. It's a for 8 days course. We have to go. We have to attend this physically to it. There is some. We have to submit some projects and presentations, and then there is exam. That's it.
And I would like to highlight that I have also done this course, I think 2 years back. And even though I'm not into forensic practice, I'm into completely GST. But the level of leverage that I've got from this course itself. See, let's understand, you do a course only to understand, have the knowledge. It's not that it should be always a money earning capacity. The Excel knowledge that we got from the forensics, and the level of thought process that has changed, and the penetration of the digital technology in today's arena, wherein you have GPS, you have satellite, and you have so many other tools which can actually help you to understand. For example, when Archika was mentioning about the stores inventories mentioned in the balance sheet of worth crores of rupees, but when you physically visit over there, you don't even see that inventory is existing, or it may be not even the match to the level it is mentioned. So
Right.
normally what is happening is nowadays people are using satellite. So recently there was one more case wherein a assessee has claimed interest on a particular housing property as a deduction and then loss on the capital gains. And when the income tax officer actually inquired, he got doubtful, and then he used the satellite to trace out that particular property, and then he got to know the property did not even existed on that particular location. So that's the level of forensic thoughts that we get from this knowledge.
Yeah.
Forensics, so FFD course, whether you try to get some income from that or not, but it's better you do the course because it gives you a very different 360-degree leap on the entire knowledge.
Now,
Yeah.
I being a forensic auditor, now it's become difficult for me to become a statutory auditor, frankly.
I know.
Acha, when you were saying this, ki, the income tax officer was become suspicious. One thing again here, but I just for 5 minutes I'll share that not a forensic audit, but we were doing a concurrent audit of some bank, and they assigned us to visit the premises of 14 accounts which were actually quick mortality accounts. They turned into NPA within a year. So they asked us just to visit there and to give our reports. And when my teams moved there, moved there, we found that sorry. So we actually find that either the addresses does not exist, or the addresses are in some premises. Though premises was somewhere under construction and are now the construction was stopped long back, and there is nothing there, or the premises which were burnt, there was some fire some years back. There is nothing over there. So these are the cases. So even I prefer I suggest whenever we are going for a forensic audit, we should visit the premises. At least not from inside to outside, we can get this.
At least get a GPS tracker. I know.
Now
So
that's
thank
a
you
good
so
idea.
much, Archika.
To that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Archika. It was a brilliant session. And Shweta, can you give the vote of thanks, please?
Thank you.
I think thanks बहुत छोटा word हो जाएगा. Really, it was fantastic and wonderful session. So yeah, and next time I'm looking more and more session on this topic because audit is really मतलब मेरे लिए तो audit ही main area है. So definitely हम और बात करते हैं इसके ऊपर. And definitely, so it was really fantastic session.
Next
so
time, then
thank you so much.
I'll try to share more of my experience.